Hi, I'm Lucy, and in today's video I'm going to talk to you a little bit about myself, my inspiration for writing, my latest novels, and I'm going to read some chapters from those novels, and I'll also talk to you a bit about my non-fiction books that I write as well. Okay, so I'm a registered counsellor wellness coach, and I also work 4 days a week for the Australian government. And so my writing is basically done in my spare time, so I do that on a part-time basis, weekends, whenever I have some time to write. My inspiration to write was due to my love of reading over the years, and I started writing a number of years ago, wasn't successful with a publisher. Then back in 2015 I decided to get back into writing after I got an iPad as a gift. I looked at a particular story and I thought, well, I can do this. I can create digital books and I can put them online. So I did all my research about self-publishing, enhanced my writing craft, and I went about self-publishing my book back in 2015. Now that was my very first novel then, so looking back at that, I actually unpublished that novel because I have grown as a writer and I'm actually reworking that very first novel that I wrote. Now the genres that I write in are romantic suspense, thrillers, Italian historical fiction, and also non-fiction books. Now I was inspired to write romantic suspense because I really enjoy figuring out the criminal mind, the love of psychology, and also enjoy reading in this genre. With the Italian historical fiction, I was inspired by my parents' Italian heritage. So I interviewed them both in regards to stories while they were growing up and just embellished their childhood stories into a novel. So they're part of my Italian family series. And I've also got short story thrillers as well. Now with the non-fiction books, I enjoy helping people as a counsellor and coach, and I was inspired to write a few non-fiction books as well. So I will talk to you about those a bit later. Now, so what I'd like to do right now is to tell you about my latest novel. This one's called Twisted Obsession. So this is a romantic suspense novel. Now this story is about a social worker, Liz Rendiza, who basically finds out that her ex-boyfriend has been released from prison. She begins to panic, gets anxious about that, and then she meets Matthew, her love interest. There are challenges around their love story as well. Then as time goes on, things escalate, there's danger at every turn, people die, and I guess there is increasing danger for Matthew and Liz, and there is a twist at the end. So what I'd like to do is read a couple of different chapters from this book for now, and yeah, do that right now. Just give me a sec. Okay, so this first chapter is just talking about Liz and her finding out about her ex-boyfriend's release from prison. Liz Rendiza rested back on her beige suede sofa, her laptop sitting on her lap as she clicked on icons to access information for a client. She didn't normally work on the weekends, but she'd had a recent influx of cases at the centre where she worked as a social worker. She peered at the blue sky through the glass doors, finding comfort in her first-floor Altona apartment within a 5-minute walk to the beach, gym, shopping strips and cafes. She enjoyed a refreshing walk along the pine-lined beach foreshore, relaxing on the balcony on those warm, balmy nights. She turned off her laptop, put it aside. She rose from the couch, reached into the fridge for a jug of water. Pouring it into a glass, she took a sip and stared at the date on her calendar. She flinched at the sudden reminder of what was happening today. No, it couldn't be today, could it? Her hands suddenly shook as she closed her eyes briefly, squeezing her hands tight. In spite of the warm spring air, a trail of coldness raced down her spine. He's back, and he's coming for me. This will never end. Staring at the letter stuck to the side of the fridge announcing his prison release, she struggled to breathe. She had to get out of there. Liz grabbed her bag, stepped out of her apartment in a daze, and headed into the basement car park. Her sweaty hands gripped the steering wheel as she drove towards her friend's house in Williamstown, not too far from her place. Her friend Bella lived in a cottage-style house that was inviting and cosy. Liz always felt comfortable there. Right now she needed company, but she had to get a grip on this. Maybe it wasn't as dangerous as she first thought, but who was she kidding? On the drive over there, images flashed across her mind, but she couldn't think about it now. She had to talk to someone, and Bella was always there to lend an ear. Clearing her mind, she remembered that her friend Jamie was working a late shift tonight. But Bella should be home. As a psychologist, Bella had always had ways to make people feel safe. Okay, so I won't read the rest of that. I've got another chapter that I'd like to read, and this one is basically about just introducing her love interest, Matthew. So just a little bit of their banter. Liz nodded. So what do you do? He lifted his posture. I'm a firefighter. I can certainly see you as a firefighter. She peered into the distance. I'm reminded of the show Chicago Fire too. I absolutely love that show. He swallowed. And how do you see me as a firefighter? He tilted his head, waiting. You look fit and you're pretty muscular. And the show, what do you like about it? The men on that show know how to protect and serve the people. They're not too bad to look at too. You have a reputation to uphold, Matthew. His face warmed. So you saying that I'm good looking and a stereotypical firefighter then? Liz blushed and averted her eyes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. He leaned forward, gazing into her eyes that was still averted. It's fine. I'm honoured that you admire my work in Chicago Fire. It's a great show. I watch it too. And I can say that some women on that show are great and great to look at too, and beautiful like you. Liz got up from the table, clearing her throat. I'd better go. I have another house call to make before going home. I'll visit you soon and see how you're going. Matthew rose. He wanted to hit himself for adding that last sentence, but he couldn't help himself. Sure, Liz, and thanks so much for your help today. Appreciate it. Liz half smiled. Any time. Bye, Matthew. Bye, Liz. He walked her out to her car and watched her drive off without looking at him. She couldn't have left the house fast enough. What was he thinking when he mentioned her beauty? She was so mesmerizing to him that the words slipped out. A woman had never had this much of an effect on him, and he was starting to dream about her at night. But his focus had to be his responsibility to Mariana, his niece. He had to respect his working relationship with Liz, seeing that she was Camilla and Mariana's caseworker. Thinking about a relationship with Liz would impact his family responsibilities. He had to put aside his feelings and treat her as the professional that she was. He could do that. He had to do that. Okay, so that's Twisted Obsession, my second book in the Friends in Crisis series. This book here is the first book of the Friends in Crisis series. So this was self-published in December last year, early January this year. So this is called Haunted by the Past, and it's also a romantic suspense and thriller, and this features Liz's friend Bella, who is a psychologist, and she basically wants to expand her private practice, and she ends up having a stalker, and the stalker tends to escalate. There is a murder scene of an acquaintance of an old person that she previously went to school with. So she's murdered. The detective questions her, and there is a forbidden sort of romance and love interest with the detective. He works on her stalker case as well, so it is a bit of a forbidden kind of love. Things do escalate. People around Bella and the detective Marco start dying. Things get worse. There's danger at every turn. There is a bit of a twist at the end, and the life of Bella and Marco are in peril. So I'd also like to read some chapters from this book as well. So bear with me. Okay. So this one is talking about the murder scene. with her acquaintance. Detective Senior Constable Marco Petrozzini stepped across rough, uneven ground, strewn with stones, pebbles, dust and rubble, making his way around the Brooklyn tip. He joined the officers already there and his partner Tim, who was short, overweight and wearing a severe gaze. Marco assessed the scene before him. He grimaced at the rich smell of blood as he assessed the victim. "Hey Tim, you've spoken to the officer on the scene?" He took out his notepad. He nodded. "I have. The body was found at 7 this morning by the manager of the site." He pointed. "He's over in the building throwing up. We'll need to talk to him." "Any witnesses or other staff present?" "No. The other guy who works here starts in an hour. He was alone." Marco knelt and bent down close to the naked body, careful not to touch it. That was the medical examiner's role. The woman's body and bone structure hinted at beauty, but her face had been disfigured with puncture wounds. He noted multiple stab wounds around the abdomen, some shallow and some deep. A small sentence had been carved into the top part of her chest. "You've been marked." What did that even mean? The body looked bruised and battered, with rope markings around her wrists. Her skin was grazed and cut around the ankles too. Tim moved towards the body. "What are you thinking?" He rose from his position. This poor woman had obviously been tortured before being killed. A slow kill to prolong the killer's pleasure, asserting their dominance over the victim with the stab wounds and the torture. He turned to an officer. "Let's cordon off this area and don't let anyone inside the perimeter. We'll need the ME to examine the body and to contact crime scene. We also need to raise tarps to protect this area. If it rains, we'll lose whatever evidence there is." The officer nodded. "We need prints and an ID, and check missing persons cases too. The torture was prolonged, so I'm assuming she's been gone long enough for someone to miss her." Marco took a few photos and a video of the body with his phone, then interviewed other officers on scene. His partner Tim created a rough crime scene sketch. The purpose to be pretty strong to dump the body here. Probably used a van to transport the body. "She definitely was dropped here like a piece of rubbish, exposed and mutilated," said Marco. He grimaced and stroked his throat. Okay, so this particular chapter is about Bella visiting her friend Jamie, and she's about to leave, and then they see a bulky figure outside. As Jamie closed the door behind her, Bella waited. They walked to the end of Jamie's yard and Bella froze. Something wasn't right. The night grew silent and still, as if holding its breath. The hair on her shoulders stood on end. Her whole body refused to move. Even her legs couldn't carry her. She stood frozen in her spot. The moon lit up the deserted street. Apart from a few cars, no one was around. It must be the silence unnerving her. Then she saw him. Jamie turned and made her way to Bella, then stopped. "What's wrong?" Bella's whispered words were shaky. "Look over there, that man." A bulky-looking man wearing a leather jacket with a beanie and boots loomed in the distance, staring at Bella. His head tilted and then he pointed at her with a finger. He directed it towards himself and moved it across his throat. He took a few steps towards her, zombie-like, grimacing, then throwing his head back in a chuckle. Bella and Jamie backed away and headed slowly to her house. "Let's get back inside. He's crazy," said Jamie. Bella's throat tightened. Her hands were clammy. The man quickened his steps, carrying something in his hand. Bella's body shook, her mouth dry. He smirked. She shivered all over. The bulky man ran full force towards them. Jamie quickly opened the door and pushed Bella inside. She locked the door and peered through the blinds. "He's standing in front of the house, but I don't know what he's doing. I'm calling the police. We have to report this." Jamie grabbed her phone and dialed. Bella's elbows pressed into her sides, making herself as small as possible. Her shoulders tightened and her breathing became shallower. She avoided looking through the curtains, her heart beating a mile a minute. She took calming breaths. Jamie turned towards her. "He's gone now. You okay?" Bella nodded slowly, her legs giving out on her. She tumbled to the floor. Jamie knelt beside her, holding her tightly. Was that man her stalker, or was he a crazy person with nothing better to do? Couldn't be a coincidence. She couldn't keep living this way, forever scared and not wanting to go outside. Something had to give. Okay, so I've just got one more chapter to read, and this is just showing the connection between Bella and Marco the detective. Okay, Bella clasped her hands together, ignoring the magnetic pull to Marco. Took all her strength not to move in and kiss him on those thick, rosy lips. Took all her strength not to touch his muscular shoulders and chest, and have his arms wrapped tightly around her. He was a detective, and she couldn't get involved when he was working on her case. Control yourself, Bella. He's not only a detective, but way out of your league. He'd never be interested in you that way anyway. Well, I guess I was mostly right. He relaxed his posture. His eyes glossed over her with a softened gaze. He took half a step forward and gently touched her shoulder. His hand lingered just a bit too long. Bella became aware of her own heartbeat. She felt warm with goosebumps prickling across her body. She ached to touch him. She rested her own hand on his. She couldn't help but stare deeply into his eyes in the same way he was fixing his gaze on her. She shifted and he leaned in, stroking her cheek as Bella closed her eyes to savour the tingling, gentle sensation of his hand on her cheek. She wanted Marco, and it was so very wrong. When Marco wrapped an arm around her waist to draw her in closer, Bella's mind turned to her previous relationship with a man who first appeared to be a gentleman, but then ended up cheating. He had also been a compulsive liar. She barely knew Marco, and letting down her guard now would risk her getting hurt, or even worse, abandoned. She had had enough of that to last her a lifetime. She came to her senses, pulled away. Bella rushed to the door. I think you'd better leave, Detective Marco. I have a busy day today. He bowed his head. I'm sorry, across the line. It won't happen again. With a few steps, he was out the door. Bella quickly closed it. As she watched him drive away, her skin prickled with danger. She suddenly felt cold and alone. She looked out the patio windows. Was that someone moving in the bushes? Surely it had to be her imagination. There was nobody around. She pulled the blinds closed, locking the door, and sat on the couch, cowering. Okay, so that's two of my latest books. So I guess with Haunted by the Past, I was inspired to write that after watching Mindhunter, reading Mindhunter, and also watching Criminal Minds. So like I said before, I do enjoy the intrigue and profiling of the criminal mind. So I've always had fascination with suspense and thrillers. I'll just have a drink of water. Bit of a dry throat. Okay. So now just to give you a bit of a rundown and show you some of my non-fiction books. This is my very first book I wrote, Your Holistic Career Path. This one was inspired by my work as a rehab consultant, so helping people to get work. So it's a book about career guidance and doing it in a holistic way. So that was my very first book. My next one is entitled Holistic Spiritual and Mental Health, and this, again, as a counsellor and coach, I wanted to give a little bit of information about building resilience, about anxiety and stress management. So that's that one. This other book, Moving Beyond Grief, was inspired by my son Jared, he died a number of years ago, and I guess I wanted to capture his story in this book. It also has some information about grief and loss, so provides a bit of psychoeducation. So that's that one. Now, the final book that I've got is a reader's journal, and so this one pretty much is probably a handy book for book club, book chat groups, which just talks about the title, character profiles, the plot of the book, the review, how the book related to your own life, what you learned from reading the book, its message. So it's pretty much just keeping a record of all the books you've written, and it's got some lovely quotes in there as well. So that's the reader's journal. Okay. So look, it's pretty much a rundown of my work as an author of fiction and non-fiction texts. So I really love writing, and I'm going to continue writing, and I'm working on the third book in the series Friends in Crisis series with Bella and Liz's friend Jamie, so that's in the works. And if you wish to have further details about my work, you can visit www.lucyappadooauthor.com.au. If you're interested in my non-fiction books, you can follow me on www.holisticallylucy.com. You can follow me on Amazon and also social media, including Facebook, Instagram, BookBub, LinkedIn, Goodreads, and Twitter. That's about it. Look, so thank you so much for listening to my video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed giving it. And yeah, look, take care. Thank you so much, and all the very best. Thank you. Bye.